Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Whisper. Tonight we travel far north, beyond the Arctic Circle, into a place where the sun vanishes for months, and the darkness becomes a living thing. These are 8 true stories from researchers, pilots, locals, and travelers who lived through the polar night and came back changed. Each account was gathered from first-hand testimonies, archived police reports, and emergency dispatch logs that paint a picture of something ancient, something that watches when the world goes dark. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Shadow Whisper for nightly true horror stories that keep you questioning what's real and what waits beyond the light. Now let's begin. I flew bush cargo out of Nome for 7 winters. Mail, fuel drums, medicine, whatever small villages needed before the sea ice sealed the coast. You learn to read the weather like scripture up there. One wrong cloud and the tundra swallows you whole. That January night was supposed to be routine. I had 3 crates of insulin, a spool of copper wire, and 2 hours of calm air before the next storm. The temperature sat at 31 degrees Celsius. The world outside the hangar looked carved from glass. At 10 p.m., the northern lights started to move. Not drift, move. Like someone had taken the green curtain and shaken it until the sky rippled. I radioed tower. "Nome Control, you seeing that?" The dispatcher laughed. "Looks like we've got a show tonight." I almost laughed too until the light brightened to white, so bright it cast shadows on the runway. Then my headset filled with voices. Not static. Not cross-frequency chatter. Voices. Layered, whispering, dozens at once, speaking in rhythms instead of words. Some high, some low, weaving through each other like waves. I tapped the squelch. "Control, repeat transmission?" No response. Only that chorus, rising and falling with the light. For a second, every gauge in the cockpit froze. Altimeter, compass, even the clock. Then they started spinning. Smooth, continuous rotations like magnetic north had been erased. I shut the radios down. Still the voices came, bleeding through the headset even without power. The aurora pulsed overhead, slow and deliberate. Green folding into violet. Violet into gold. Each color change matched a shift in tone. Lower frequencies with darker hues, higher ones with the brighter flares. It was like watching speech written across the atmosphere. Then a single phrase cut through the layers, clear and cold in English. "We hear you." Every hair on my arms rose. The sound wasn't directional. It came from everywhere, through metal, through skin. I yanked off the headset and stumbled out onto the tarmac. The sky above Nome was alive. Curtains of light twisted together, forming a column straight over the field, and at its base, where the glow touched the ground, the snow was melting. Steam curled up around my boots. The air vibrated deep in my chest like standing too close to an engine. When I tried to shout for the ground crew, my voice didn't carry. It folded back into my ears, distorted. Then, between the waves of color, I saw silhouettes. Human shapes, dozens of them, walking through the shimmer like shadows behind frosted glass. One stepped forward, lifted an arm, and pointed directly at me. My headset, still hanging around my neck, snapped with static and a single flat tone. The same voice repeated, closer now. "We hear you." The tower light blinked once and went dark. Generators kicked, failed, restarted. In the brief blackout, the sky went pure black, no stars, no aurora. Only that tone humming through bone and fuel line alike. When the lights returned, the figures were gone. The runway steamed in wide circles, perfect as crop marks burned into snow. I didn't fly that night. None of us did. The FAA took our radio logs, our flight tapes, even the black box from my Cessna. Said it was interference from a foreign satellite array. But they never explained the part that kept me awake. The message that repeated in the silence after the tone faded. Your turn to answer. I still don't know what question they asked. 2 days after the incident, the FAA grounded every small aircraft within a 100-mile radius of Nome. They said it was due to solar interference. But I've seen solar storms before. They make static, not sentences. I should have gone home. I should have forgotten it. But something about that voice wouldn't leave me. It had sounded human, but not from here. Too precise, too calm, as if it had been rehearsed for centuries. When the investigators left, they took the black box from my plane. But they didn't know I'd wired a backup recorder beneath the dash, a habit from years of flying bush runs with poor maintenance crews. At night, while the hangar slept under the hum of frozen air heaters, I powered it up. The first 30 seconds were normal. Prop noise, tower chatter, then silence. At 22:03:11, the aurora brightened on the horizon. Then it began. That deep harmonic resonance, the one that made the instruments shiver. I boosted the gain and the noise resolved into patterns. Not random tones, syllables. Low male voices forming shapes that my ears almost understood, like listening to English played backward. Every few seconds, something like a breath passed through the microphone, a single exhale that fogged the audio like frost. And under that, faint human whispers, thousands of them layered in every language I'd ever heard. Russian, Inupiat, Mandarin, French, Arabic, even children's laughter woven like a thread through static. I scrubbed forward. At 22:05:17, the phrase repeated, "We hear you." Except this time the voice was my own. I froze the playback. In the background of the recording, under the tone, a second sound pulsed every 4 seconds, a mechanical click. I ran it through spectrum analysis. It wasn't electrical. It was biological, like a heartbeat. I turned the speakers up, volume high enough to make the hangar echo. The pulse grew louder, steadier, until my coffee mug trembled across the desk. Then for one impossible moment, the recording went stereo. The voice came not from the laptop but from inside the room. "You answered." I spun around. Every bulb in the hangar flickered to green, matching the aurora that still faintly danced through the skylights. The radio on the wall, switched off, unplugged, crackled alive with whispers that overlapped like distant chanting. Then my backup recorder began to transmit. The LED light blinked in Morse rhythm. Short, long, long, short, repeating endlessly. I wrote it down, hands shaking. It spelled, "Listen back." The next morning, I took the device to a friend, a retired radio technician named Vaughn, who'd worked out of Anchorage. He plugged it into his analyzer, squinted at the readout, and frowned. "There's no carrier frequency," he said. "It's not transmitting anything. It's receiving." "Receiving from what?" He shrugged. "Maybe nothing we built?" When he played the file again through his lab monitors, we both heard it. Between the voices, there was another signal. A faint, rhythmic pattern of coordinates. Not GPS, older, mapped to something polar deep under the Arctic Ocean near the magnetic North Pole. Vaughn turned pale. "Whatever this is, it's calling from under the ice shelf." That night the aurora returned, brighter than I'd ever seen. The entire sky rippled golden blue, pulsing in time with that same heartbeat rhythm from the recording. Then my phone vibrated, no number. Just a single word on the caller ID, reply. I answered silence, then faintly, a voice that wasn't through the line but through the air around me. "Do you hear them now?" I stepped outside into the cold, phone still in hand. The aurora formed a column directly above the airstrip again. For the first time, I could see movement inside the light. Figures rising and falling as if floating through liquid. Silhouettes of people climbing toward the stars. Then my phone began to play the same hum from the black box. Low, pulsing, alive. I dropped it into the snow. The screen flashed coordinates, the same Vaughn had found. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Vaughn called, his voice cracking. "The recorder's gone," he said. "Just vanished, and my clock stopped at 22:05 last night." The exact minute the aurora had pulsed over the runway. We both agreed never to speak of it again. But 2 weeks later, He disappeared during a coastal flight to Barrow. His plane was never found. Only a distress ping broadcast once, a digital echo of my own voice whispering through the Arctic static. "We hear you." I told myself I'd stop chasing it, that I'd let Vaughn's disappearance be the ending. But silence has a way of convincing you that something's still listening. A week after his plane vanished, Nome went dark, full communication blackout. Satellite feed, radio, even cell towers dropped off one by one, all within a single minute. People blamed a solar flare again, but when I stepped outside, the sky was clear and the aurora was green. Not bright, not dancing, just still. A flat ribbon stretched across the stars, unmoving, like someone had painted it there. The air didn't move either. Even the wind turbines at the research outpost had frozen mid-spin. I could feel that hum again, crawling up through my boots, through the bones in my legs. It wasn't sound anymore. It was pressure. I went back to the hangar. The backup recorder was gone, but the black box the FAA had taken, somehow, was sitting on my desk. A note beside it, written in Vaughn's handwriting. "Play it when the sky stops moving." I didn't think. I just did what it said. The moment I connected the box to power, the hangar lights cut out. The only glow came from the aurora filtering through the windows. Dull, green, heavy. Then the speaker hissed and a voice came through, distant and hollow. "This is Vaughn. Coordinates 81 north, 64 west, if anyone." Static devoured his words. Then, faint behind the interference, something massive groaned, like ice shifting under pressure. A deep resonance rolled through the speaker, too low to be machinery. It made the walls flex. The transmission continued, fragments bleeding through. Not water, something under the shelf. Like watching us. Another crash. Then silence. I was about to power it down when a second voice entered. Not Vaughn's, not mine. Smooth, clear, inside my skull instead of through the speaker. "He heard us. So do you." The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged the room. Metal shrieked overhead as the hangar frame expanded and contracted in slow pulses. Breathing. Then the black box lit up on its own, projecting coordinates across the small digital screen. They weren't Vaughn's, they were moving. Numbers shifting every few seconds, tracing a slow path south, from the Arctic shelf toward the coast, right toward Nome. I ran outside. The aurora was no longer flat. It was bending, a massive funnel of light descending toward the airfield, twisting in absolute silence. For a moment I thought it was an illusion, until snow and dust began rising off the ground, spiraling upward. In the center of the runway, a circle of green light burned into the snow. And inside that circle, silhouettes. Dozens again, maybe hundreds. But this time they weren't distant. They were stepping through. Each shape flickered in and out like bad signal. Human outlines 1 second, hollow shadows the next. No faces, no eyes. Just mouths moving as if in unison, whispering words that weren't sound but memory. I could feel them inside my head, repeating what I'd heard since that first night. "We hear you." Then something else. Softer, new, almost pleading, "Now listen." The light collapsed inward, a single beam striking the black box I still held. The display went blank. The air pressure changed so fast it felt like the sky was inhaling. And then silence. When I woke, the aurora was gone. The world was normal again, except the hangar doors were open, and snow had drifted inside around my boots. The black box sat where I'd dropped it, cold, inert, ordinary. The FAA returned 3 days later to collect it. They claimed they'd never taken the device before, that it had never left the hangar. Their agent smiled too politely when I mentioned Vaughn's name and said no such person was in their records. I didn't argue. 6 months later, I moved south to Anchorage. But sometimes when the sky clears, I still check the radio at night. At exactly 22:05, the same time my gauges froze that first night, I pick up a faint transmission. Not words, tones. Low hums layered like breathing. and underneath them a voice that always matches my own, whispering in rhythm with the heartbeat of the aurora, "Your turn to answer." And each year, when winter comes and the northern lights begin to move, I can't shake the feeling that they're not there to be watched. They're waiting for someone to speak back. I've worked search and rescue in northwestern Alaska for 12 years. Snowmobile recoveries, lost hunters, thin ice accidents, the usual tragedies. But the night I saw her, I stopped believing that every call ends with a human explanation. It started in late February of 2019. The sun had begun its slow return, but the horizon still bled more twilight than light. A fisherman from Kotzebue had gone missing. A man named Elijah Danner, 48, last seen near the frozen shoreline by the lagoon. He'd radioed his wife around 11 p.m., said his snowmobile had stalled but he could see town lights across the ice, then silence. We found his sled the next morning, engine cold, tracks ending mid-lagoon like he'd simply stepped off the world. The ice was solid for miles. No cracks, no hole, no sign of struggle. Just his footprints, 23 of them ending in a half-turn. Like he'd turned back to look at something, and walked no further. That evening I stayed behind while the others packed up. I don't know why. Maybe guilt, maybe stubborn hope that the man was still out there somewhere. The wind had dropped to nothing, and in that stillness you can hear things you shouldn't be able to. The crackle of the ice miles away, the sigh of your own breath fogging inside the mask. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a reflection, a pale figure standing near the horizon line just where the lagoon met the sea. Too far to make out details, but distinct against the faint aurora haze, motionless, thin, and wearing what looked like a tattered parka. I flashed my light once, standard signal. No movement. Flashed again, and nothing. I radioed the base. "I think I see someone on the outer shelf." They told me no one else was cleared on the ice that night. When I looked back, she was closer. Not walking. Closer, like the space between us had simply collapsed. Her outline was wrong, though. Too straight, as if her limbs didn't bend where they should. The parka's hood hung low over her face and the hem fluttered in a wind that wasn't there. I called out, "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" The sound vanished and swallowed before it reached her. No echo, no carry, just gone. Then she lifted one arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed, not at me, but past me toward the ice behind my snowmobile. I turned. At first, I saw nothing, just the reflection of my headlamp on the uneven surface. Then as my eyes adjusted, I realized the ice ahead of me was darker. A faint shape was trapped beneath it only a few feet down. Human. Curled sideways like a child sleeping. I stumbled backward. My flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled, its beam flickering over the frozen face beneath the surface. It was Elijah Danner. Eyes open, mouth slightly parted, skin perfectly preserved in the sub-zero clarity of the lagoon. And yet, there was no break in the ice, no fracture. Nothing to explain how a man could be sealed beneath solid ground. I looked up to call the others. The woman was gone. I marked the coordinates and reported the find. When we returned at dawn, the ice was clean, no body, no discoloration, just empty blue-white glass as far as you could see. The team thought I'd misidentified submerged driftwood, or maybe a seal carcass refrozen under thin layers. But the sonar scan we ran later that day showed something different. A hollow cavity the exact shape of a man, 13 feet long, pressed into the underside of the ice. And at the edge of that void, right above where his face had been, the sonar painted a smaller shape. Upright. Human height. Still there. That night the locals started talking. They said she'd been seen before. The Watcher in White. Some called her a ghost, others something older. Something tied to the permafrost. Every generation had a story. A woman found frozen solid, unmelting no matter the fire. A figure seen pointing toward thin ice before a storm hit. A body recovered days later wearing clothes decades out of time. I didn't believe them. Until the next missing report came in. A young woman this time. 19, a nursing student visiting family. Last seen walking her dog near the same shoreline. When we arrived, we found her phone in the snow, still recording video. I hit play. The footage showed her facing the lagoon, aurora shimmering faintly overhead. Then the dog froze, ears up. The girl turned the camera and for half a second, between static bursts, a tall, pale figure appeared at the edge of the frame, pointing toward the water. The video ended there. The timestamp read 11:02 p.m. The same minute Elijah Danner's final radio message had cut out 2 weeks earlier. That's when I stopped, believing coincidence had anything to do with it. The ice was keeping secrets and then she was the messenger. We began the second search before dawn. 5 volunteers, 2 snowmobiles, and a drone team from Anchorage. Temperatures hovered around -30, cold enough to burn skin through gloves if you stood still too long. We followed the last coordinates from the missing girl's phone, tracking faint dog prints that led toward the lagoon. The prints stopped halfway across the ice, just like Elijah Danner's had, only this time there was something else beside them. A second set. Not boots. Bare feet. Each print was narrow, elongated, and pressed deep enough to suggest impossible weight for a human frame, and they led straight toward the center of the lagoon where the sonar had mapped that strange hollow. The drone picked up something unusual almost immediately. A perfect circular patch in the ice, about 6 meters wide, discolored from beneath as though the ice had been lit from below. No cracks, no fissures, just a soft pulsing light under the surface. Faint, greenish-white like an aurora trapped in frozen glass. The pilot thought it was a reflection from the sky until the light began to pulse in time with the drone's engine noise. We pulled the drone back. I told the others to mark the coordinates and set up a perimeter. No one argued. Everyone felt it. That slow, heavy pressure that builds right before something happens, like the air itself is waiting. By mid-morning, we drilled a small inspection hole near the circle's edge. The first few inches were solid ice, clear as crystal. Then the auger hit something soft but organic. We dropped a fiber optic camera through. What appeared on the monitor made every one of us go silent. A face stared back, pale, motionless, eyes open, frozen wide, lips slightly parted as if in mid-breath. But it wasn't the missing girl. It was Elijah Danner's again, same parka, same expression, the same body I'd seen beneath the ice 2 weeks earlier. Except the sonar readings proved the cavity had collapsed days ago. He couldn't still be there. The deputy beside me whispered, "That's not possible." And then the face blinked. We all jumped back from the monitor. The drone operator yanked the cable up like it was burning him. But the screen stayed lit. The image shifted, water swirling, movement beneath the ice, like something alive was pressing upward against the camera lens from below. Then the feed went dark. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that single blink, that fraction of motion in a face that shouldn't have been there. So I went back to the ice alone. Stupid, I know. But sometimes duty and obsession are the same thing. The sky was clear, stars sharp, aurora faint. No wind, no sound but my own boots crunching across the crusted snow. When I reached the lagoon, the circular patch was gone, refrozen, smooth and white. But near the edge of the shore, something stood waiting. A figure, still, silent, shrouded in frost. The Watcher. Her parka was torn, stitched with long strands of what looked like sinew. Her face was pale as bone, her eyes black and hollow. Yet I could feel them pulling me in. She didn't move at first, just raised one arm again, slow and deliberate, and pointed toward the ground at my feet. I hesitated, then shined my flashlight down. There, half buried in the snow, was a glove. I picked it up, the missing girl's name stitched inside the cuff. When I looked back up, the Watcher was gone. I turned to leave, but a whisper slid across the ice like a voice carried through miles of frozen air. "Return what was taken." I froze. The voice wasn't female. It was layered, many voices, overlapping, male and female, young and old, all speaking the same words in perfect unison. Then the ground trembled. Hairline cracks spidered across the ice in front of me, forming a perfect circle around where I stood. Inside that circle, the snow began to sink. Not melt, sink, as if the ice beneath it were breathing in. I leapt back just as the center gave way. For a second, I saw what was underneath, rows of frozen figures, dozens of them suspended in the black water below the ice. Men, women, children, all with their eyes open, faces turned upward toward me. Their hands reached for the surface as if pressed against invisible glass, and among them, one face stood out. Vaughn, the missing technician from the Aurora Voices. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, breath clouding in the cold. The ice sealed itself shut, the cracks knitting over with faint frost lines as if nothing had happened. I ran. By the time I reached the rescue base, I could barely speak. The others thought I'd fallen through a snowdrift and hallucinated from the cold, but the glove was still in my pocket, soaked, freezing, and absolutely real. When they tested it later, they found traces of human skin cells fused to the inner lining. Not from the girl, from multiple individuals, some matching DNA profiles of people missing for over 50 years. That's when the old stories stopped feeling like folklore. That's when I realized the Watcher wasn't showing us where the lost had gone. She was showing us what she was keeping. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't stop hearing it. The whisper that had followed me home, replaying inside my skull like a heartbeat trapped under ice. Return what was taken. At first, I thought it was guilt. Survivors' paranoia from too many cold rescues gone wrong. But then the voices started showing up in the recordings. Every radio log, every transmission from that night had faint background noise. Rhythmic pulses hidden in the static. When slowed down, they formed words spoken backward, and when I reversed the file, every one of them said the same phrase: "We are beneath." On the 3rd night, my supervisor, Captain Reeves, called me into the station. The lab had finished analyzing the sonar data from the lagoon. He didn't say anything at first, just pushed a printed image across the table toward me. At the center of the sheet, beneath layers of faint color mapping, was a hollow, elliptical, cavernous, far deeper than our drills had reached. He tapped it with his finger. "This chamber," he said, "depth over 200 feet. No seismic record of it ever forming." "And that shape?" I asked. He hesitated. "We thought it was artifact noise." But after enhancement, he turned on the monitor behind him. The image sharpened, a massive silhouette embedded in the ice cavity. It wasn't geological, it was humanoid, 30 feet tall, arms outstretched, head tilted upward as if frozen mid-prayer. That night, a blizzard rolled in, cutting Kotzebue off from the mainland. Whiteout conditions, power flickering, radios hissing, at exactly 11:02 p.m. The same timestamp tied to every disappearance. Our motion sensors along the lagoon perimeter began triggering one by one. I was on shift when it happened. The feed from camera 9 showed nothing but blowing snow at first. Then a figure emerging through it, walking against the wind, completely unaffected. White parka, bare feet, and behind her in shadows. Dozens of them. They weren't walking. They were sliding over the ice like reflections moving without a source. I grabbed my rifle and my radio, but the line was dead. Every channel hummed with that same low-frequency pulse I'd heard on the recordings. Then the emergency floodlights cut out, plunging the compound into blackness except for the green shimmer of the aurora, and she was standing right outside the glass. The Watcher. Up close. She wasn't spectral, she was solid, ancient. Her skin the color of frostbitten snow, her hair a tangle of white strands that seemed to float even in still air. Her eyes were hollow but not empty. Inside them, Faint ripples of light moved like reflections on water. Her lips never moved, but her voice filled the room all the same. "You've taken too much from the ice." I tried to speak, to ask what she meant, but the air was thick, vibrating, alive. The temperature plummeted. Frost crawled over the walls like veins. Behind her, the ice at the lagoon cracked open in a perfect circle. Steam, or maybe breath, rose in a steady column. Shapes began to rise within it one by one. The missing. Not corpses, not quite alive either. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, their faces expressionless, skin smooth as glass. Each of them frozen mid-motion, standing on the surface like mannequins of ice. And at the center, towering above them all, I saw the giant from the sonar image. Its face was faceless, smooth and ancient, carved by time or worship. It turned its head toward me, slow, deliberate, as if recognizing something familiar. The watcher stepped aside. Her voice echoed inside my skull once more. "Return what you buried, before the thaw." Then everything collapsed. The ice roared like thunder, splitting the earth. Blinding light, green and white, shot upward, shaking the ground. The windows shattered inward. I hit the floor, covering my head as shards rained around me. When I looked up again, the lagoon was still. No watcher, no figures, just endless, perfect ice. The storm broke at dawn. When the rescue teams finally reached us, they found me half buried in frost inside the ruined outpost. The cameras were dead, but the data drive survived. Every frame from 11:02 p.m. to 11:09 showed nothing, just a blank white screen, except for the final second. A single frame burned into the feed, the watcher, standing alone in the doorway, her face turned toward the camera. And beneath her, faint letters etched into the snow in jagged lines, "Not yet returned." They evacuated the station the next day. The lagoon was declared unstable and sealed off under federal order. But satellite imagery still shows a faint ring visible from orbit, a perfect circle of thawed ice that never refreezes, even in 40 conditions. Locals say on certain nights when the aurora burns low and white, you can see her walking along the shoreline again, searching for what we took, pointing toward the ice, waiting for the next voice foolish enough to answer. If you've ever lived in Anchorage, you've probably heard the rumor that beneath the downtown grid lies a network of sealed tunnels built during the Cold War. Officially, they were meant for freight transport and civil defense shelters. Unofficially, no one really knows what's down there. The entrances were welded shut in the 1980s after multiple collapses, but that hasn't stopped the stories. When I joined a private security company in early 2020, I didn't think I'd become part of one. Our firm handled industrial surveillance contracts, mostly oil depots, construction yards, and storage facilities. One of those facilities sat right above an old freight tunnel junction near 4th Avenue, a concrete relic from the 1950s. The city had repurposed the site into a municipal supply depot, but the ground beneath it was unstable, riddled with voids. My job was simple: night security. 12-hour shifts, motion sensors, camera feeds, and one rule printed in bold on the instruction sheet taped to the wall. If you hear knocking from beneath the floor, do not respond. I laughed when I first read it. By my third night, I wasn't laughing anymore. It was just past 1 a.m. when the vibration started. Faint, rhythmic thuds coming from deep below the concrete. At first I thought it was the boiler system or maybe snowplows outside, but the pattern was too precise. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. I went downstairs to the storage level to check the pipes. The lower corridor was narrow, lit by flickering fluorescents. The air felt heavier down there. Colder too, like the heat from the upper floors couldn't penetrate that deep. The sound grew clearer the closer I got to the eastern wall. When I crouched and pressed my ear against the floor, I could actually feel the knocks echoing through the cement. Each impact sent a faint tremor up my arm, steady as a heartbeat. Then something answered back. 4 knocks this time. Slow. Intentional. I froze. It didn't sound like machinery. It sounded like someone beneath me, knocking back. I called maintenance thinking maybe a utility worker had somehow accessed an old shaft. No one answered, so I checked the camera feeds. Every frame was static, distorted, as if something heavy was vibrating the wiring itself. I tried to shake it off. Made some coffee. Went back to my desk upstairs. At 2:13 a.m. the power cut out, all of it. Every light, every monitor, even the emergency backups. The only illumination came from the small flashlight clipped to my vest. And then the knocking returned. Louder, faster, directly below my chair. I backed away slowly, scanning the floor for any sign of movement. The concrete had hairline cracks running in every direction, and as the knocks continued, fine dust began to sift out of them, like something was pushing upward from below. I radioed. Dispatch, static, tried the landline, dead. The only sound in the entire building was that steady rhythm of knocks, then it stopped. For 10 long seconds, silence filled the room, heavy and complete. And then came a new sound. A scrape. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across concrete. It circled the room beneath me, one slow rotation, then stopped right under the hatch that led to the basement. Something pressed against the metal from underneath. Once, twice, and then withdrew. I waited until sunrise before leaving that building. When I returned the next night, I found my supervisor already there. He looked pale, exhausted. Had another power surge? I asked. He shook his head. We lost an inspector this morning. Went down to check the old utility conduit. Never came back up. Collapse section? Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. But we picked up this. He handed me a recorder, the kind that automatically captures audio from the surveillance system. The playback was short. A man's voice echoing through metal corridors, breathing hard, footsteps crunching on grit. Then 3 knocks, paused, then another 3, this time closer. The man muttered something and sounded like, "Who's down there?" And then faintly a reply. A voice not transmitted through the air, but through the concrete itself. "Still here." A long, dragging sound followed, like something crawling on its elbows through a narrow space. Then a scream, cut short by the sound of breaking metal. The recording ended there. I wanted to quit that night. But part of me, and the stupid, stubborn part, needed to know what was under that building. So I went down, past the storage level, past the boiler room, through a maintenance hatch that hadn't been opened in years. The smell hit first, a mix of damp soil, rust, and something else. Something old. A ladder led 30 feet down into darkness. At the bottom, my flashlight beam cut across a long corridor of reinforced concrete, the walls sweating with condensation. Every surface was etched with scratch marks, hundreds of them, some old and faint, others fresh enough to still glisten, and painted across one wall in faded red letters. "Do not dig deeper. They move below." The air down there felt ancient, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. Every step echoed for seconds, swallowed by the weight of the concrete. My flashlight beam cut through a haze of fine dust that glittered like snow. It was beautiful for half a second until I realized the dust wasn't falling down. It was rising, pulled upward by some invisible current. The corridor stretched ahead for what looked like 30 yards, sloping slightly downward. On the left wall, metal doors were set into the concrete every 10 feet. Each one had a small stenciled label, F3, F4, F5, freight holding units. But every door was welded shut from the outside. When I passed the 4th, my light flickered. Once, twice. Then a whisper slid through the dark. "Still here." I froze, heart pounding. The voice came from beyond the wall, deep, muffled, like someone speaking from underwater. I tried to tell myself it was air escaping from the old ducts. Then the metal bulged outward with a heavy thud, as if something inside had hit it from the other side. I stepped back. The sound came again, 3 slow knocks. The same rhythm from the floor above. My radio hissed to life. Don't there. You're alone down there, copy? Get. Static devoured the rest. I turned to leave, but the ladder I'd climbed down was gone. Not collapsed. Gone. Just a smooth wall of concrete where the shaft had been. My stomach dropped. There was no exit, no way up, no light from above. Only the corridor stretching forward, downward toward a faint glow. So I went toward it. The tunnel widened into a circular chamber maybe 20 feet across. The floor sloped into a shallow pit filled with standing water, black still and ice cold. Above it, heavy pipes ran along the ceiling like veins, and etched into the far wall just above the water line were words scratched in jagged letters. They live in the sound. Something rippled the surface, then another ripple, closer this time. I raised my light. For a split second, I saw fingers break the water's skin, pale and long, pressing gently against the concrete floor as if testing it. Then they withdrew. The water stilled. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That's when I noticed the walls. They weren't smooth anymore. They were breathing, slow rhythmic pulses, the concrete expanding and contracting like muscle. And beneath the sound of my own breath, I could hear faint movement in the walls, crawling. Dozens of things moving inside the structure itself, dragging across rebar and pipe. Then a voice. Clear this time. Right behind me. We built over them. I spun around, light shaking. A man stood at the edge of the corridor, or what looked like one. He wore an old municipal uniform, faded and stiff with dust. His face was gray, eyes sunk deep, lips cracked and pale. Who are you? I managed to ask. He smiled, or tried to. His jaw cracked when he moved it. We sealed them in, thought the concrete would hold. I stepped closer, trying to focus the beam. Half of his body shimmered, translucent, like heat distortion. What's under here? I asked. He tilted his head slowly. Not what. Who? The light flickered again, and he was gone. The next sound came from the water. A single splash, then another, then hands, too many to count, breaking the surface, gripping the edge of the pit. Each hand was long, thin, grayish-white, slick with what looked like oil. They clawed for purchase, pulling something enormous toward the rim. I ran. The tunnel behind me echoed with wet, dragging sounds, bodies scraping against concrete, nails clicking like insects on tile. I could hear them whispering now. 1,000 overlapping voices repeating one phrase. Still here. Still hungry. My flashlight beam hit a metal door at the end of the corridor, half open. I squeezed through and slammed it shut behind me. The hinges screamed but held. On the other side was a short flight of stairs leading up to a rusted hatch. I shoved it with everything I had, and the seal broke with a crack like gunfire. A rush of cold air hit me and I climbed out into the open. I was back in the boiler room, except the clock on the wall didn't read 2:30 a.m. anymore. It read 5:12 p.m. full daylight. I'd been gone for 14 hours, quit that night. But 2 days later, the city sealed the depot, citing subsurface instability. No one mentioned the missing inspector again. The company wiped the incident from records, and the floor where I'd first heard the knocking, they poured a new layer of reinforced concrete over it, 3 feet thick. It didn't help, because last week I got a voicemail from an old coworker who took over my shift. The message was short, panicked, barely a whisper. They're knocking again, but this time they're on the walls. I tried to ignore the voicemail, deleted it even. But that night around 2 a.m., I woke to a faint vibration running through the floor of my apartment. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I lived 12 miles from the freight depot, and yet the sound was the same. By morning, curiosity had rotted into obsession. I drove back downtown, parked across from the sealed building, and waited until dusk. City crews had fenced off the site, but there was a gap near the service gate. Inside, the new concrete slab gleamed under floodlights, smooth and spotless. But I could feel the pulse through my boots. That low, bone-deep thrum that matched a heartbeat far too slow to be human. Something was moving underneath. I knelt and pressed my palm to the surface. The vibration grew stronger, rhythmic, patient, aware. Then a whisper brushed the air just above the slab. Still here. The sound didn't echo. It came from below the concrete, each syllable pressing upward like breath through soil. I stumbled back. A line of fine dust traced itself across the floor where my hand had been, forming words as if invisible fingers were writing through the powder. Let it out. I ran. But before I reached the door, a sharp crack echoed behind me, the sound of concrete splitting. I turned in time to see a fissure rip through the slab, spiderwebbing across the floor. Chunks lifted, shifted, and a thin stream of black water seeped through, glistening like oil. The smell hit next, metallic, earthy, like wet iron and rot. Then came the sound, a deep, slow dragging from beneath, as though something vast was shifting in its sleep. The fissure widened. Concrete crumbled inward. From the darkness below, a shape rose. At first, I thought it was a mass of cables, thick, slick, twisting in the dim light. But then one of them moved with intention, coiling upward until it pressed flat against the floor like a hand. 5 long, jointless fingers, skin the texture of clay, each one flexing independently, feeling the air. Another followed. And another. The hole deepened as if the ground itself were making room. Then slowly the head emerged. It wasn't monstrous in the way I expected. It looked almost human, but stretched wrong. Features flattened, eyes recessed into smooth hollows, mouth a thin, wet seam that trembled but never opened. Its skin was gray and translucent, pulsing faintly with veins of orange light that moved like liquid under the surface. When it exhaled, the air shimmered. Not steam, not mist, but vibration itself. The walls hummed. Metal beams shook loose frost from the ceiling. And that voice, the one I'd heard through the floors, through the radio, through the walls, now spoke directly inside my head. They sealed us to save themselves. They built their city on our backs. I couldn't move. It rose higher, shoulders scraping the concrete edges, limbs bending the wrong way as it tried to fit into a space never meant for it. We remember the first dig. We remember the warmth of your fires. We were awake beneath your feet when you forgot. The air turned electric, dry, humming, heavy with static. And behind the creature, deeper in the hole, I saw dozens more. Pale faces pressed against the tunnel walls, their mouths moving soundlessly, eyes reflecting the dim orange glow. Something cracked above me, the floodlight supports bending. I ran for the exit, boots slipping in the thin layer of oily water spreading across the floor. The door slammed behind me. I didn't look back. Outside, the ground trembled once, deep, resonant like thunder underground. Then silence. When city crews returned the next morning, they found the slab completely intact. No cracks, no signs of tampering. Just one thing out of place. A single black handprint pressed into the surface near the eastern wall. It was still wet when they found it. 2 weeks later, Anchorage experienced a 4.9 magnitude tremor, minor by Alaskan standards. But the epicenter didn't match any fault line. It came directly beneath the old freight junction. Since then, workers in the surrounding blocks have reported strange sounds in the basements, low knocks echoing through foundation walls, and voices whispering through concrete at night. When they built over those tunnels, they thought they were burying Cold War relics, but something else had already been buried there long before. And now, it's awake. Every town has that one house nobody rents for long. In Fairbanks, ours sat 2 blocks from the river. A squat green cabin leaning against itself like it wanted to fall. Locals called it the house that broadcasts. It had no cable, no Wi-Fi, and yet every radio within 100 feet picked up a signal on 1440 AM, a low hum that never stopped. No station ID, no music, no voice. Just that sound, a steady tone layered with faint static, as if someone were whispering beneath the frequency. When I took the job cataloging repossessed properties for the city in 2016, that house was on my list. Third visit of the day, 35 degrees outside, sky a dim gray bowl. The snow around the porch was untouched, but the doorknob was warm. I remember thinking the air felt charged inside like before lightning strikes. The house smelled of dust and old metal, wallpaper peeling in vertical lines that looked almost deliberate, like someone had traced a map into the walls and then torn it free. In the living room stood an old Philco radio from the 1950s, plugged into nothing. The dial was set to 1440, and it was on. The hum filled the air immediately, soft, rhythmic, like breath drawn through a throat half asleep. I unplugged the cord, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from the walls. Back at the office, I asked dispatch to pull the utility records. The address hadn't drawn power since 1997. The last tenant on file, Arthur Meeks, ham radio hobbyist, missing since winter of '98. According to police notes, neighbors had complained about voices bleeding through the air every night before he vanished. No one ever found him. Just that radio still turned on. I went back 2 nights later with my recorder, partly for documentation, partly because I couldn't stop thinking about that hum. It wasn't random. It pulsed every 5 seconds like a heartbeat. At exactly 11:43 p.m., it changed. The tone bent upward, like someone tuning a violin string too tight. Then a click and a whisper so faint I thought it was interference. Testing. 1, 2. The recorder captured it clear as day, though I hadn't heard it with my ears. Another voice followed. Slower, distorted, overlapping itself. "Arthur, is that you?" I shut the recorder off. The hum continued, steady and different. When I left, the air outside the house was 30 degrees warmer than the rest of the block. My boots sank into snow that steamed faintly in the cold. The next morning I played the tape in the office. At the 32-second mark, just under the words, "Arthur, is that you?" another layer appeared, a woman's voice whispering my name. Not Arthur, mine. I didn't tell anyone. But that night, curiosity dragged me back again. This time I brought an old handheld transceiver tuned to 1440 AM. As soon as I switched it on, the display flashed live for half a second. An impossible message. That model didn't have digital broadcast capability. Then a voice came through, calm and monotone. "Please stand by for recording." Signal confirmed. Every radio in the house clicked on at once. The dials spun of their own accord, each needle stopping at 1440. And from somewhere deep inside the walls came a faint rhythm. Knock. Pause. Knock, knock. I realized with a chill that it matched my own heartbeat. Then the voice returned, closer, as if the speaker were standing right behind me. "If you can hear this, don't answer." The transceiver burst into feedback. I dropped it and ran outside, stumbling into the snow. From the doorway behind me, the old Philco speaker crackled once more. Transmission received. I should have stopped then, but the next day, city maintenance crews called my office. While prepping the property for demolition, they'd uncovered something under the floorboards. A microphone array, decades old, still wired to a grounded copper antenna that disappeared into the frost beneath the house. One of the workers said the cables were warm to the touch. Another claimed to hear someone whisper through them when he put his ear close. I asked what they did with the equipment. He said, "We left it. It's still humming." They postponed the demolition until the ground thawed. In Fairbanks, that meant months. So the house stayed, sealed off by yellow tape and silence. The hum still bleeding faintly through the snow like a heartbeat trapped in frost. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But on the 7th night, I woke to that same low frequency coming from my bedside clock radio, even though it wasn't turned on. 1440 AM. The display glowed on its own, and from inside the speaker came that same voice, slow and deliberate. "If you can hear this, don't answer." Except this time the voice sounded like me. I drove straight to the house. Snow fell in thick sheets, windless and dry. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been, maybe 60 degrees, despite no heat source. The Philco still sat in the living room, speaker faintly vibrating. The moment I stepped inside, it began broadcasting again, but not words this time, breathing. Steady, human, recorded too close to the mic. Then a man's voice, distant, buried under layers of static. "Arthur Meeks, entry 14, signal stable. It's speaking again." He paused. A hiss filled the gap, then another voice, not his. Soft, feminine, sounding almost like a lullaby played through a dying battery. "Stay with me, Arthur. Keep the signal open." Then came a click. Silence, and finally a single new sentence, clear and sharp. "He's standing in the same spot." Every hair on my arms lifted. I turned the light toward the nearest wall and saw it. A dark outline had formed behind the wallpaper, perfectly human-shaped, arms pressed to its sides, head tilted slightly left, the same pose I was standing in. The pattern wasn't painted or drawn. It was burned into the plaster. When I moved, it moved with me. Half a second late, like a lagging reflection, I took one step backward. The shape stayed still. Then from the Philco speaker, a whisper, almost playful. "Your turn to broadcast." The light flickered out. I don't remember leaving. My next clear memory is sitting in my truck outside the property, engine running, breath fogging the windshield. The radio dial glowed faintly, stuck on 1440. The hum filled the cab. Low, patient, alive. Then my own voice came through the speakers. "Testing. 1, 2. I slammed the power off. The hum kept going. Through the rearview mirror, the house stood dark against the snow, but its windows were glowing from the inside. Faint amber light pulsing in sync with the rhythm of the hum. As I watched, the light shifted, faster, irregular, like Morse code. I grabbed my notepad and wrote it down. After decoding, it spelled 2 words: "Don't leave." The next morning, my supervisor asked why I'd visited the condemned property after hours. He said a motion sensor had triggered at 3:11 a.m., recording a minute of footage before the camera shorted out. He showed me the clip. It was grainy, low-res, but the timestamp was clear. The footage showed me standing in the living room, motionless, facing the Philco radio. The speaker was glowing orange. My mouth moved, but the audio had been replaced by a low, continuous tone. Then I turned toward the camera and smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone. The kind you give a mirror. The feed cut to black. Later that day, when I checked my recorder, there was a new file I hadn't made, titled simply Broadcast 02. Inside, an unfamiliar voice whispered, "Every signal needs a receiver. Thank you for listening." The file timestamp was 3:11 a.m., the exact minute I'd been inside the house on video. I quit the city inventory program that week, but before I left Fairbanks, I stopped once more at the radio tower station near the edge of town. The technician on duty looked tired, half frozen. He said, "You're the second person this month asking about 14:40 a.m. Who was the first?" He frowned. "Some woman. Said she used to live there, in that old greenhouse. She wanted to know if we could still hear her husband's voice." "What did you tell her?" He looked out the window at the snow, then said quietly, "I didn't. The tower hasn't broadcast in 20 years." That night, back in my hotel room, I turned on the radio one last time. 1440 a.m. came alive instantly. No tuning delay, no static fade. And through the hum, 2 voices intertwined, Arthur's and mine, speaking the same words in unison. "Testing. 1, 2, we're still here." I left Fairbanks 3 days later. But distance doesn't help when something can travel through air. On the drive south, every time I passed through static on the car radio, I'd hear a faint tone drift in, that same low hum, steady pulsing. By the time I crossed the Yukon River, it was clearer than the stations around it. 40 a.m., I shut the radio off. The sound didn't stop. 2 weeks later, I was renting a small place outside Anchorage. New address, new number, no forwarding. Still, the first night there, I woke at 3:11 a.m. to a faint light flickering on the wall. Not outside, not from the street, but from inside the plaster itself. A pulsing glow, amber and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of that old Philco radio. When I got close, I could hear it again. That low hum underneath the surface of the wall, vibrating through paint and insulation. Then a whisper, soft as breath, still transmitting. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. The warmth came instantly, and faint under my hand, 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I spent the next day trying to ignore it, drowning the noise with music, with anything. But the moment I turned everything off, laptop, phone, fridge hum, the silence filled itself again. The house began to speak. It wasn't words at first, just tone patterns rising and falling like Morse code played through the bones of the building. But slowly the rhythm began to form into something else. A voice, layered, distant, metallic. We never stopped. You tuned in. That's enough. I found the courage to go through my old recordings. The first file from that Fairbanks house, the one where I'd heard Arthur Meeks, had changed. The waveform was different, longer. When I played it, the familiar hum was gone. Instead, I heard streets. Snow crunching, footsteps, a car passing, then a voice that wasn't mine yet came from my own mouth in the playback. Testing. 1, 2. Can anyone hear me? A reply faint but unmistakable. We always could. That same evening, a box arrived on my porch. No return address. No postage. Inside was the Philco radio. Clean. Restored. Polished like new. Taped to the back was a note written in faded pencil. The frequency finds its host. It moves to where it's heard. The dial was already set to 1440. I carried it outside, set it on the snow, and smashed it with a hammer until the casing cracked. Inside were coils of copper wire, freshly cut, bright, not rusted at all. But what chilled me most was the smell, warm dust and the faint metallic scent of breath. That night the hum came back, but not from the walls or the radio. From me. When I spoke, every sound carried a faint undertone, a vibration that rattled in my chest and echoed in the windows. I covered my mouth. The tone grew louder, deeper, until glasses on the counter began to tremble. Then, through that sound, another voice spoke, perfectly synchronized with my breathing. You're our new signal. The lights dimmed, and for a brief second, every object in the room cast 2 shadows. One black, one amber. The hum peaked, then stopped completely. Silence. I thought it was over. 2 days later, I got an email from a former co-worker back in Fairbanks. Subject line 1440 AM picked up again. She attached a short clip. The recording was full of static, but near the end you could hear a man speaking. My voice, flat, calm, mechanical. This is station 1440, signal clear. Repeat after me, testing. 1, 2. Then, faint in the background, a woman's voice overlapped mine. The same lullaby tone from Arthur Meek's old tapes. Stay with me. Keep the signal open. I don't turn on radios anymore, or televisions, or anything that can transmit or receive. But sometimes, late at night, the air itself starts to hum. Walls vibrating softly, snow shifting outside in rhythm. And if I listen too closely, I can hear them whispering through it all. Every listener becomes a station. Every silence waits to be filled. I worked the night desk at a roadside stop halfway up the Dalton Highway. 9 cabins, 1 diesel generator, a gas pump that froze every 3rd night. We called it Cold Foot Rest, though nobody ever really rested there. Truckers came through at odd hours, locals once in a while, and the occasional tourist too stubborn to turn south when the sun disappeared for good. January meant polar night. 3 months of blue twilight, and a silence so thick you could hear the frost forming. That winter, we were at half occupancy, and I was covering solo shifts because my coworker caught pneumonia in Fairbanks. By the time midnight rolled around, I'd usually brewed enough burnt coffee to stain the air brown. That's when the stranger showed up. He didn't drive in. There was no sound of tires on snow, no headlights stretching down the highway. Just a figure standing outside the glass door, his coat frosted white, his eyes unreadable in the porch light. I opened the door a crack. "You lost?" I asked. He smiled faintly. That polite kind of smile people use when they don't want to answer questions. "Cabin," he said. No greeting, no small talk. Just cabin. I asked for a name, a card, any ID. He slid across 320s. Crisp, new serial numbers in sequence. "Cash only," he murmured. "Cabin 12. I glanced at the logbook. Cabin 12 was open, so I handed him the key. He took it with bare hands, skin unreddened like the cold didn't touch him, and turned toward the snow-covered walkway. No luggage. Not even gloves. "Checkout's 11, I called. He didn't answer. He just walked into the dark until the porch light swallowed him. At first, I figured he was a loner. Truckers sometimes booked a cabin to sleep off a bad patch of road. But we hadn't had any rigs pass all evening. Still, I logged him. Entry 23, unknown male, paid cash. Cabin 12. An hour later, I went outside for a smoke. The air was the kind that burns your throat clean. From the office porch, I could see every cabin light except one, number 12. The curtain was open, lamp unlit. But inside the window, I swear I saw movement, a faint glow like a cigarette ember pulsing once every few seconds. Then it went dark. I told myself it was a reflection from my own smoke. At 3:17 a.m., the power flickered, just for a heartbeat. When the lights came back, the radio behind the desk crackled to life, dial unmoved. A male voice whispered, "Still waiting." I spun the knob, switched frequencies, killed power to the receiver. Silence. My pulse thudded in my ears. I tried to shake it off. The generator sometimes cross-fed static from passing rigs. Except there were no passing rigs. At dawn, what little dawn there was, I went to drop off fresh towels at each cabin. 11 doors opened to the cold smell of diesel heat and stale cigarettes. Number 12 looked untouched. No boot tracks, no melted snow on the porch, but the door was unlocked. Inside, heater humming steady, sheets crisp, air faintly metallic. On the nightstand sat the room key neatly folded inside a napkin. Under the napkin, 3 crisp 20s. Exactly the same bills I'd given him change from. Same serial run. The bathroom mirror was fogged, though no one had showered. When I wiped it, letters appeared beneath the condensation, written in something dark that wasn't steam residue. Still waiting. I stepped back so fast I hit the doorframe. I called our manager in Fairbanks. She said maybe a prank, maybe carbon buildup in the heater causing hallucinations. She told me to air out the room, bleach the surfaces, and not make a fuss. Tourist season was coming. That night, I left the door to cabin 12 locked and lights off. At 2 a.m., the office phone rang once, not long enough for caller ID to register. When I lifted the receiver, only the hum of the line, then under it, breathing. Slow, patient, matching the rhythm of that ember glow I'd seen the night before. Cabin 12, a man's voice whispered. I slammed the phone down so hard the hook cracked. The next morning I checked the security feed. Grainy black and white cameras mounted along the walkway. At 2 a.m. the phone had rung. On the monitor at that exact second the door to cabin 12 opened. Not fully. Just enough for a shape to slip out. Tall, narrow-shouldered, coat hanging like a shroud. The figure paused, turned toward the office camera, and stood perfectly still for 30 seconds. The timestamp read 02:37. Then the image fuzzed, white snow static. When it cleared, the door was closed again. I rewound the feed 3 times. Each time the same distortion right when the man turned his head. Like the camera itself refused to hold his face. The next guest checked into cabin 12 2 nights later. an oil contractor from Anchorage. He lasted until sunrise. At 6 a.m., I found him outside barefoot, pacing in the snow, whispering, "He's still in there." When I opened the door, the heater was off. The air felt dense, like standing inside a held breath. On the wall mirror, new words had formed in thin lines of frost. "Don't let him check out." I told management again. They sent a maintenance guy to replace the heater, repaint the mirror, get rid of the ghost story. He stayed an hour, signed the work order, left early looking pale. That evening, when I checked the logbook, someone had written a new entry in tight, unfamiliar handwriting. Entry 24, Cabin 12, checked in forever. The ink was still wet. After that entry appeared, I stopped writing anything in the logbook. It didn't feel like mine anymore. The paper smelled of cold iron, exactly the way the inside of Cabin 12 had smelled. For 3 nights, the place stayed empty. I locked it, chained it, even hung a plumbing out of order sign. Still, each morning I'd find the chain loose and the key back on the hook, polished clean. The 4th night, just after 1 a.m., a snowstorm hit, the kind that eats sound. The generator groaned, lights flickered, and the radio started spitting static again. I turned it off. It turned itself back on. 12 open. The voice wasn't whispering now. It was almost conversational, calm, like someone asking for a receipt. I froze behind the counter. The front door motion bell chimed once. Outside, through the swirl of snow, a single porch bulb glowed orange. Something moved past it, tall, thin, featureless in the whiteout. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and shouted, "Cabin 12 is closed!" The wind swallowed my words. Then, faint through the snow, I saw the walkway light by Cabin 12 click on. One light, then the next. Like someone walking slowly toward the door, triggering each sensor in turn. When the final bulb lit, the cabin door was already open. Inside, the air was warm. Too warm. Every other heater in the row strained against the cold, but here the thermostat read 78 degrees. Condensation bled down the windows. The mirror over the dresser was fogged again. I wiped it with my sleeve. New letters formed, not written but emerging from the steam, like something underneath the glass was pressing forward. "Stay with me." I stepped back, heart hammering, and that's when the door slammed behind me. The handle twisted under my hand, ice-cold metal biting my skin, and locked. The key still hung from the hook outside. I pounded the glass, shouted for help, but the storm drowned everything. Then the heater died. Instantly, the warmth drained out like someone had pulled the plug from the world. In the silence that followed, a low hum rose from the vent. Not mechanical, vocal. A man's breathing, slow and shallow, filling the air like smoke. I turned the flashlight toward the sound. The beam struck the wall mirror. There was a reflection. Not mine. A man stood behind me. Same coat as the stranger, same expressionless face. But where his eyes should have been, there were 2 dark circles fogging the glass. He raised his hand in the mirror. My real reflection didn't move. I spun around. Nothing. Just the bed, the lamp, the open vent sighing. When I turned back, the reflection smiled. The lamp beside the bed clicked on by itself. Its shade glowed deep orange, like the ember I'd seen the first night. Something stepped out of the reflection. Half light, half shadow, its outline rippling as if heat distorted the air around it. It whispered through both ears at once. "You checked me in." My legs locked. The flashlight dropped. In the brief flash before it hit the carpet, I saw that the figure's coat wasn't cloth at all. It was the cabin's wallpaper, peeled and moving like fabric. It took a step forward, and the floorboards beneath its feet warped inward, swelling toward it, folding the room around its shape. I bolted for the bathroom. The door jammed halfway. Something heavy pressed from the other side. When it finally gave, I fell hard against the tile. The mirror over the sink was shivering, tiny fractures crawling outward from its center. In the cracks, dozens of tiny eyes opened, milky and blinking. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off every light. For a second, perfect silence. Then a single knock on the bathroom door, followed by my own voice on the other side saying softly, "Checkout confirmed." The doorknob turned once, twice, stopped. Footsteps receded across the room. Then nothing. I waited until sunrise, or whatever passes for sunrise in January, and forced the window open. The storm had cleared. Fresh snow lay smooth across the porch, undisturbed. No prints. No sign I'd ever been there. When I reached the office, the heater was humming normally and the logbook lay open on the counter. A new line had appeared in the same tight handwriting. Entry 25. Attendant moved in. Cabin 12 occupied. The pen beside it was still warm. After that night, I should have quit. I should have packed my bag, left the logbook open on the counter, and driven south until I saw daylight again. But the thing about the Dalton Highway is, there's nowhere to run to. The next town is a rumor half buried under ice. So I stayed. The manager called that morning asking about the power outage. I told her everything was fine. I didn't mention the mirror or the voice or the fact that my name had appeared in the logbook without my hand ever touching a pen. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, isolation. But even as I said it, I kept glancing toward cabin 12 through the office window. Its curtains were closed now, but sometimes when the wind died, I could see a faint orange light moving inside. Not a lamp, not a fire. It pulsed like a heartbeat. That evening, just before my shift, a new traveler arrived. A young woman with a duffel bag and frost in her hair. Her name was Claire, and she said she'd been driving north to visit her brother at Prudhoe Bay, but couldn't risk the storm. Just for one night, she said, rubbing her arms for warmth. Every instinct told me to say we were full, to tell her to keep driving, but I didn't. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was curiosity. Some sick part of me wanting to see what would happen if someone else went inside that room. Cabin 11 or cabin 12? I asked before I could stop myself. She smiled. Doesn't matter. Which one's warmer? My throat tightened. 12, I said. I helped carry her duffel along the icy walkway. The air stung like glass. She chatted about the aurora forecast, about how quiet the north felt. I barely heard her. The entire time I kept glancing at that door. Same paint, same brass handle, same number worn to the metal. It looked expectant. She thanked me, went inside, and shut the door. The porch light flicked once and went out. I stood there for a full minute listening. Nothing. Back at the office, the radio hissed. A voice bled through the static, low and steady. She's here, I killed the power. The hiss didn't stop. I unplugged the radio. It kept whispering, a dry scrape of breath crawling out of the speaker cone. Don't let her leave. The generator lights flickered red. Outside, the other cabins dimmed one by one until only cabin 12 stayed lit. A single window glowed orange against the snow. I grabbed the spare keys and ran. By the time I reached her porch, the air smelled of hot metal. I could hear faint music from inside, an old swing tune warbling from nowhere, the kind of song you hear in broken radios from the 1940s. I pounded on the door. Claire, open up! No answer, then footsteps. Slow, heavy, too heavy for her. The knob twisted from the inside. When it opened, she stood there barefoot, pupils blown wide. The room's orange light bleeding across her skin like fire through paper. Who's in there with you? I asked. Her lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was his. You left the light on for me. Behind her, the walls pulsed, breathing with that same dull orange rhythm. The wallpaper flexed, bulged, and a hand pressed through from underneath. Long, narrow fingers dragging down the wall, leaving trails of frost that steamed in the heat. Claire blinked once, twice, then her expression softened, almost peaceful. She turned to face the wall and whispered, I see him. Before I could move, the hand reached out and touched her shoulder. The light burst white. I stumbled backward off the porch. When my eyes cleared, the door was closed again. No sound, no movement inside. At sunrise, I forced the door open. The cabin was empty. No sign of Claire, no duffel. No footprints in or out. The sheets were untouched. Only the mirror remained, perfectly clean, polished to a shine. And in the reflection, for half a second I saw her standing behind me, smiling. Then she was gone. The troopers came 2 days later after her car was found idling by the highway. Headlights still on, driver's seat empty. They asked questions. I gave them half-truths. When they searched the cabins, they found nothing, except for cabin 12. The officer stopped at the threshold and said, "Why is it so warm in here?" I didn't answer. He pointed to the bathroom mirror. Frost had started to creep across its edges, forming words only half visible. Still waiting. They wrote it off as a missing persons case. They left before dark. 2 months later, the motel shut down for good. Too many unexplained outages. Too few travelers. I went back once, just before the demolition crew came. The cabins were half buried in snow, windows broken, roofs sagging. Every door was open except cabin 12. The padlock I'd placed on it was missing, but the door stayed sealed, frozen shut from the inside. I pressed my ear against it, nothing. Then, one soft, deliberate knock, followed by a man's voice and a woman's laughter, both whispering together, perfectly in sync. Check-in confirmed. They tore the cabins down that spring. Now there's a truck stop there. Bright lights, concrete, security cameras. People think the number skipped in the layout, that cabin 12 was a superstition. But if you drive the Dalton at night past mile marker 175, you can still see a faint orange glow off the snow, like a lamp burning somewhere that shouldn't exist. And if you listen closely, through the hum of your engine, you might hear a voice on your radio saying, "Still waiting." I got assigned to the sea ice node because no one else wanted it in December. They told me it would be quiet work, swap memory cards, clear rime from housings, keep the generator breathing, and babysit a string of instruments that listen to the Arctic Ocean, the way a stethoscope listens to a chest. I believed them. I believed a lot of things back then. The first week blurred into the color of headlamps and coffee. Day and night meant nothing. We kept time by tasks and timestamps. At 18 rare, I'd snow machine out from the main hut to the edge of the bay, kneel on the groaning ice, brush frost off microphones the size of fists, and check the cables that ran through our augured holes into black water. You don't think about how thin it is between you and the deep until you hear it sing. On the 7th night, the recorder flagged a repeating anomaly, 243-12, LF peak at 13 Hz, low frequency, steady like a pulse under miles of water, the kind of note ships make when they are miles away. But there were no ships. The ice was fast and the Coast Guard had issued closures. Wind speed, calm. Pressure, steady. No mechanical source. I wrote it off as thermal contraction. The 8th night, I heard it with my own ears. Not through the spectrogram, but on the ice. Cheek to the auger rim, breath freezing my eyelashes. The world narrowed to a circle of black that smelled of metal and salt. The hum rose from the water like a held note, and beneath it something softer, like a hand tapping once every 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, tap. The kind of nudge you give a fish tank to see if what's inside will move. When you're alone, your brain tries on explanations like hats, seals, I told myself, even though the tapping was too regular. Brine drainage, even though the cadence was too patient. I logged it and left. At 02:43 the 3rd night, the hum came back stronger. I rigged a contact mic to the ice itself and ran a cable to the hut. No wind, no aurora static, no generator in the red. The waveform crawled across my laptop. A wide, breathing hill with the same 5-second tooth marks. I turned up my headphones until the shack felt smaller. That's when the knock answered me. Not random. Not underneath the rhythm. In it. I tapped my fingernail against the desk out of habit. 1, 2, 3, tap. And in my headphones from under the ice, I heard the pattern repeat with a half-beat delay. I stopped breathing, then tapped twice. 2 knocks came back, slower, as if the ocean was thinking between each reply. I told myself I was picking up my own contact noise. So I unplugged the mic, hard muted the input, and set the recorder to stand alone. The headphones went dead. The room sounded like cotton. I waited a full minute. Then from the muted headphones, faint enough to be a memory, the knock bled in again. I slept with the light on and the satellite phone on my chest. The next evening I brought the good mic, the one we save for whale runs, and mounted it over a fresh hole. I scraped away wind crust until my knuckles cracked, clipped the mic to a carbon arm and fed it into the dark. The sea exhaled a smell I can only call old. I secured the line, taped the cable, and checked my watch, 1:42:51. The ice beneath me creaked like a sheet of glass bending over a stone. My breath made a halo in the beam of my headlamp. Somewhere far out, the bay answered itself with a boom and a long traveling groan that made my teeth hurt. Then the hum arrived, deeper now, closer, as if it had rolled up to meet the hole. I didn't tap. I whispered, "Hello?" The hum brightened as if a throat had opened. My radio crackled on my shoulder, a lick of static that tasted like metal. Based a Node 3 copy? It was Jay back in the main hut. I kept my eyes on the hole and thumbed the mic. "Node 3, she said. "I'm getting crosstalk on CH1, kill your transmitter a sec." I did. The static died. The hum did not. "Jay," I said, "do me a favor and mark the time." "Marked? Why?" "Just mark it." I leaned over the hole. The headlamp lit a ring of rough ice where it met the water. Down beyond, nothing, then less than nothing. I brought the recorder's gain up until the meters licked yellow. The knock came at 02:43 and 07. One clean note against a surface I couldn't picture. 3 more, 5 seconds apart. When the fourth hit, I felt it through the ice, a vibration you could have mistaken for your own heartbeat if your heart lived under 30 feet of salt water. "I hear you," I said before I could stop myself. "I hear you. Can you?" Something touched the carbon arm, not a wave, not a current. A pressure, deliberate and brief, like the curious press of a forefinger. The arm twitched. The line sang. The recorder popped as if a mouth had brushed the microphone. Then from the water right below my face I heard breathing. Wet. Close. Human in shape, if not in scale. I could have run. I could have pulled the arm and told myself I'd imagined it. Instead, I clicked the red rec button with a thumb gone wooden and said, "If you can hear me, knock once for yes." Silence. 30 seconds that stretched like wire. Then one knock, slow and certain, and an after ripple that fizzed in my teeth. I didn't ask the next question out loud. The thought formed anyway, loose and terrified. "Are you under the ice?" The hum swelled until the meters pegged red and the shack lights dimmed 50 yards away. My throat closed. I shut off the recorder and yanked the arm back with both hands. The carbon came up bent. The mic housing looked like it had been pushed from the inside. A shallow dent shaped like a narrow palm. When I got back to the hut, the inside of the sampling hole had skinned over. Ice doesn't form that fast, not in air that still tasted of brine. But the hole wore a new lid, a thin, brittle window, and I could see where something had pressed against it from below, leaving a print like the ghost of a hand. I slept on the floor with my boots on, lulled by the generator and the lie I kept feeding myself. It's just ice. It's just sound. It's just me. At 02:43, the power blinked, the heater coughed, and from under the boards I felt the knock travel up through my spine. I woke before the alarm, not that it mattered. Sleep had turned into short blackouts filled with the sound of slow tapping. Every dream ended with that same noise finding me, muffled through ice. The data logger said the recorder had captured 47 minutes of clean signal before I shut it off. 47 minutes of whatever had been breathing beneath me. When the laptop finished transferring, I played it back through the speakers. For the first 3 minutes, only the hum. Deep even, patient. At 02:43:07 came the knock I'd felt, clear enough to clip the audio meter. Then again 5 seconds later, and 5 after that, the rhythm built like it was waiting for my reply. When I'd spoken, a faint distortion followed. Not words, but tone. Something had heard me. I zoomed in on the waveform. Each pulse had a rising harmonic, low rumble followed by higher overtone, exactly like a voice forming a syllable without air. I inverted the track, boosted gain, filtered noise. What came through made my blood freeze. It wasn't random. It was speech-shaped. 3 notes repeating, then pause, then 2 shorter ones. Almost like it was saying a name. Not mine, but close. A sound that rhymed with it. I sent the clip to Jay over intranet. A minute later, she radioed, "That's creepy." "Play it backwards," I did. The hum folded into itself, and behind it, faint, distant, but there, a human breath followed by a whispered down. I shut the laptop. That night I filed the report as mechanical resonance anomaly. That's what you write when you can't explain something without losing your clearance. But I couldn't stop hearing it. Even with headphones off, the low hum followed me in the metal walls, in the radiator, in my jaw, in my pulse. Every 5 seconds, 5, 5, 5, knock. The following evening I returned to the bay against orders. The sky glowed with aurora, thin green curtains rippling so slow they looked alive. I walked until I found the old hole. A fresh snow crust sealed it smooth as glass. I brushed it clear. The surface was cloudy, frozen solid. But inside, a darker shadow moved. Slow, deliberate circling beneath the ice. I told myself it was current. Then it stopped directly below my knees. I whispered, "I'm not here to bother you." A bubble rose and popped soundlessly. Behind me, the wind shifted. And from my radio, even though it was off, came a hiss followed by a voice identical to my own saying, "Don't listen." I dropped the radio. The hum surged through the ice, vibrating my ribs. I backed away toward the snowmobile, each step cracking frost. When I looked back one last time, I saw what I'd thought was a shadow uncoil upward and brush the underside of the ice. Long finger-like tendrils, black against the green glow, tracing the spot where I'd been kneeling. I drove until the coast disappeared. The engine screamed in protest, skis hammering over ridges. At the outpost, Jay was waiting at the door. "Jesus, what happened to your face?" she said. I touched my cheek. My skin was raw white, frostbitten in a perfect circle where the ice had reflected light up at me. I must have been closer than I remembered. "Node 3's compromised," I said. She looked past me. "Compromised how?" "Something's under the bay." She laughed once, tired. "Like a whale? Like listening?" We powered down the nodes for recalibration. I locked the recording drive in a metal case and left it in the generator shack. That was the plan. Quarantine the anomaly, report it later. But at 02:43, every generator light blinked red. Alarms kicked. The diesel engines roared and stalled one by one until the base sank into silence. And in that silence, the floor began to tremble. A slow, tidal rhythm, the same beat as the hum. Jay yelled from the control room, "You hearing that?" Then faint at first, the sound came through every unplugged speaker. The PA, the intercom, the dormant radio. All of them whispering the same single word. Stretched and distorted through static. Below, the emergency lights flickered green, then blue, then went black. In the dark, something hit the foundation from underneath, a single massive thud that threw dust from the ceiling. Jay screamed, "It's under us!" We ran outside into air so cold it burned the lungs. The bay lay ahead, blacker than sky, and for miles out through the frozen surface the hum rose like a choir. Not one voice. Hundreds. We climbed the ridge behind the base. From there we could see the ice field pulse in perfect circles. Wide rings of light glowing faintly under the surface, spreading outward like ripples in glass. The sound grew until I could feel it shaking the fillings in my teeth. Jay pressed her hands over her ears and shouted something I couldn't hear. Then, as fast as it had come, it stopped. Silence. No wind. No hum. The ice went dark again. When we got back to the base, all systems were normal. Power stable. Engines idle. Recorders off, but inside the generator shack, the metal case was open, and the drive that contained the 47-minute recording was gone. The company scrubbed our logs the next day. Called it an instrument sync error. They shipped us home a week early. Jay transferred to a field office in Anchorage. I haven't seen her since. Sometimes I still wake up at 02:43 and the house hums. Pipes, fridge, walls, all breathing in rhythm. And in the spaces between, I can almost hear that last word again, soft as water under glass. Below,